Welcome back to my channel. I am finally filming my labor and delivery story with this cute little one.
Don't leave, 'cause girl, I thought this was our destiny. Don't leave, 'cause girl, I want you right here next to me. Don't leave, 'cause girl, I thought this was our destiny.
She is now 8 weeks old yesterday, so definitely long overdue. What is going on, hey? Yes, I'm giving smiles. Here you go. It's good like this, hey? Rylan is in daycare, so I thought I would film this while it is quiet. Probably gonna have to feed her soon, and hopefully she'll just fall asleep. So she's eating now. So Harlow was born on February 27th, 2019, and for her due date, I had two different due dates that I was kind of using. My doctor was using my last menstrual period date, so that made my due date March 7th, and then the dating ultrasound made it March 3rd. So I was going with March 3rd because just based on how fast I got how early I got a positive pregnancy test, I felt like the March 3rd was a more accurate date, and just with my symptoms and everything, I had a feeling she was going to come earlier. So she came February 27th, so I was about 38 weeks when she was born. As far as symptoms, I had a irritable uterus my whole pregnancy with her, meaning I would get constant contractions at regular intervals, but they weren't painful, so they weren't actually causing any dilation or any effacement, anything like that. So it was just my uterus contracting, but nothing was happening. So I never really knew when my labor was going to start just because of the constant contractions. So near the end of my pregnancy, I was experiencing period type pains, not necessarily cramping. I just would relate them to just that whole body ache feeling you get right before your period comes, and that's what I experienced. So I would have to take hot baths, just that sort of thing to ease the pain, but they weren't like contractions, they weren't, you know, super painful, they weren't like cramping. So I was experiencing that starting at about maybe 35 weeks. So I did have a 38-week doctor's appointment, but she did not check me. She did not want to check me until I was 39 weeks, and at that point I would have done the membrane sweep. So I didn't know if I was dilating. I didn't know anything. I was just kind of going based on my normal irritable uterus contractions and then just my body aches and pains. So on February 26th, Dan and I had been out running errands. I felt totally normal. Again, I was just having my normal regular contractions that didn't cause any pain, weren't uncomfortable. We had been walking around a lot that day, but I mean, nothing was out of the usual. I did mention it to Dan that I was getting more contractions than I normally get, but you know, again, there was nothing concerning about it, and I was only 38 weeks, so didn't really think anything of it. And then that night, I was cleaning while Rylan was getting put down to bed, and all of a sudden I just felt fluid going down my leg. And if you're pregnant, especially with your second one, you know, it's not uncommon to have bladder issues, but I hadn't sneezed, I wasn't, you know, running. It was just a random fluid that went down my leg, so my face just went like, oh my god. And it happened just as Dan was coming up the stairs, so he was like, what's wrong? And I said, I think my water is leaking. And we were both kind of in denial that it would happen that way. So I was like, well, let me go to the bathroom and check. You know, it didn't smell like pee. Sorry if that's too much information, but I decided to put on a pair of Depends just to see if I could catch some more fluid coming out. And TMI alert, it was just really mucousy on top of the little bit of fluid that I got. So I was still in denial. I you know, just kind of went on and was like, do you think it's my water? Like, I don't feel any different. I don't feel in pain. I don't feel like I'm in labor. So I eventually called the hospital and just explained it. They said based on how far along I am, there's no harm in coming to the hospital to get checked, just because you only have so much time to deliver your baby once your waters do break or rupture, just because of risk of infection. So they did ask me to come in, and again, I felt totally fine. So I was like cleaning up the house, getting my makeup done, and I still felt a little bit of hot liquid coming out during this whole process. So again, in denial, wasn't really sure. We went to the hospital. We had Dan's mom come over to watch Rylan because she was in bed. Went to the hospital. They tested the underwear that I was wearing, the Depends, and confirmed that I tested positive for amniotic fluid. And they called in the doctor, and she kind of explained that since I wasn't really in labor yet, that I had the option of going home to see if labor gets started there. I was GBS negative, so there was no risk with that of the infection or whatever it can cause. So they did give me the option of going home or staying, and since I was totally fine, I didn't want to spend forever in the hospital, so I did decide to go home. And it was late at night at that point, so you know, I couldn't exactly go around the block for a walk. I wasn't able to do a whole lot to get labor started, and I did ask them if I should be doing anything like that, and they said, you know, you can try to keep moving or bouncing a ball, but also you want to make sure that you're resting, because you know, you don't want to tire yourself out right before labor and, you know, stay up all night trying to get things moving. So I did go to bed at like 11 or 12, and they had told me if labor hadn't started by 7 a.m. the next day, then I would be coming into the hospital to get checked again and to potentially start the induction, since you only have about 24 hours, I believe, to have the baby once your fluid starts leaking. I did ask them to check me for dilation before I left the hospital, just so that I knew, like, if labor did really start and I was in serious pain, I could kind of like mentally know how many more centimeters I need to go. So they checked me and I was 2 centimeters dilated and 50% effaced. So all those period pains, that must have been my dilation that I was experiencing, because the contractions weren't painful at all. They could have been those as well, but I do think it was more to do with the period pains that I was feeling. So I was 2 centimeters, but my waters were still like almost fully intact. I only had that little bit of fluid leaking. So went to sleep, no problem. Of course, I was a little bit nervous, just because I knew I was going to be having a baby in the next 24 hours. So that was a little bit weird. You know, like Dan and I were just kind of joking around. It was just a really different experience than when I had Rylan, since I was in labor for 2 days. It was horrible. And I was overdue and everything like that. So, oh, she's asleep. 7 a.m. came, we had our bags packed, we said goodbye to Rylan, and we headed to the hospital. We got admitted. I spoke again with the doctor just about where we were at, and they explained, you know, since your water was leaking, you only have so much time before risk of infection. So we would like to start you on Pitocin or oxytocin to get contractions moving and make your labor, you know, go into overdrive basically. So by the time we were set up in the bed and everything like that, we started the oxytocin at 9:30 in the morning, and it took about, I think it was around 11:30. That's when my contractions really started. From 9:30 to 11:30 was basically nothing. Like, you could see the contractions on the machine, but I wasn't feeling anything. We were just watching TV, watching movies, basically just killing time. I was able to eat, drink normally, so it was actually pretty relaxing during that time. By 11:30, like I said, that's when the contractions started really picking up. And during this time, they keep increasing the Pitocin dose as I go to, I can't remember how many contractions over so many minutes, but they had cranked it up. It was around 12:30, I started really feeling the pain. At this point, I haven't had any pain medication, just because I knew I wanted the epidural. So if I was going to get the epidural, I didn't want a whole cocktail of drugs. So I was holding off on everything until I knew I could get the epidural. And again, my first labor took forever, so I was scared to request the epidural too early and, you know, have it wear off or slow down the progression. But then I also was scared to wait too long and then not have that opportunity and have to kind of go through the whole thing without any sort of pain management. I finally asked for the epidural at about 1:30, and at that point they checked me. I was either 5 or 6 centimeters, so I was happy at that point to request it, but the anesthesiologist took forever to set up and get it going. So I didn't actually get the epidural till about 2 o'clock, and when he was doing it, I experienced a lot of pain, which the first time I had the epidural with Rylan, I didn't feel any sort of pain, and it basically worked within like a few minutes after he had finished. Whereas this one, it was just horrible going in. I felt it more on the right hand side, whereas before I didn't feel anything. So I had a feeling something was up. And again, he took forever. So that whole experience I did not enjoy, whereas the first time I had no issues at all. And then finally when he was done, it was like 2:10, and I was still feeling horrible, horrible, horrible contractions. So I kept asking, when is the epidural gonna work? When's it gonna work? And the anesthesiologist was like, well, it should be working by now. And I was feeling everything, like absolutely everything. And once I was finally able to lay down after the epidural was in, that's when my waters like completely ruptured. It was brutal all over the bed. And when your water breaks, that's when you really feel the pressure because you don't have that cushion anymore. So it was like 2:15 now, and I was in severe pain. The epidural was not working. The nurse kept putting like cold packs on my legs, asking if I could feel them. And I said, no, I don't feel the cold, but I feel every single contraction. Like, that's great about your ice pack, but I'm feeling all the pain. And then it was too late to get any sort of pain medication like fentanyl or anything like that. So it was brutal. And to give you an idea, so my water broke at 2:15 and Harlow was born at 2:43. So literally within 30 minutes, it was like boom, 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 baby is out. They did have Harlow on a monitor the entire time, and her heart rate was good. Everything was good like that. I'm just gonna pull up my actual birth report from the hospital. So it says that the doctor was called at 2:15 as the patient had begun to feel quite pushy and on exam had been found to be fully dilated. So within about 45 minutes, I went from 5 centimeters to 10 centimeters. That's how fast things can happen when you're in active labor. Like, it went from 0 to 100 real quick then. So I was fully dilated at 2:15. It just says, at this point, Jennifer felt ready to push, and she pushed very effectively in the whatever position. It says baby crowned quite slowly. So during the pushing, I felt everything. I felt the burning ring of fire that everyone talks about. I felt the head pressure. I felt the shoulders. I felt absolutely everything. The epidural did not do anything for me. And when the doctor was pushing, we were counting to 10 and everything like that. And then once the head came out, that was when they were feeling for any cords. And within like a few seconds, we didn't even have like an opportunity to even like think about anything. When she came out, they instantly cut her cord and took her away to the little baby bed section area. And as they were holding her, it's actually pretty traumatizing. I have a little bit of PTSD from this, and I think so does Dan. But when they pulled her away from me, her entire head was blue. Like, she did not look right. Like, it honestly, Dan told me after the fact, he was like, I thought you gave birth to a stillborn child. That's how bad she had looked. And she was completely limp. When they pulled her out, her arms were to the side, completely limp. And it was awful, like, to be quite honest. We both were just like staring at her the entire time, and I remember the nurse beside me talking to me, and I was just not even listening to her. And I just kept saying, is she okay? Is she okay? Is she okay? Because she wasn't crying, she wasn't breathing. And it was just honestly pretty traumatizing. So in the report, it does say that, I don't know if you can hear her snoring. Baby crowned quite slowly, and when the head emerged, it was found to have 2 loops of nuchal cord that were quite tight, however, were able to be reduced. They were moderate shoulder something. The doctor was able to release the anterior shoulder. Babe was quite flaccid at birth, and as such, delayed cord clamping was not done. We quickly clamped the cord and moved baby over to the warmer for resuscitation. She did need PPV for approximately 2 minutes before she began to breathe spontaneously. So during this 2 minutes, which honestly felt like the longest 2 minutes of my entire life, we had the 2 doctors trying to resuscitate her, and the nurse was like massaging her body, trying to get blood flow, circulation. They had the oxygen mask on her, which I think has the steroid in it to just get the lungs really pumping. And then the other doctor was also massaging her body. So that was 2 minutes of her just laying there completely limp. It was awful to watch as parents, and of course I'm hormonal to begin with, but to just lay there and wonder if everything's okay, because the doctor's not talking to us because her focus is on the baby, of course. So in the moment, it all just was, it happened so fast but so slow all at the same time. So after that time, she finally started gurgling and, oh hey, come here. She finally started gurgling and crying, and once she started crying, Dan and I both just had a big sigh, and we both instantly started crying because it was just so traumatizing, to say the least. And then once she was going, you could tell even the doctor was relieved. It's all, that part is kind of a blur to me just because of how concerned we are, but she did start breathing and it was fine. And it can be such a common thing, the cord around the neck, and I had known she was fine in the belly because they had the monitors on her, so her heart was still going, she was fine. It wasn't until I was pushing her out that the cord tightened around her neck. So she wasn't, you know, she wasn't in distress in the actual womb, so that, you know, makes me feel better after the fact. So when she started breathing again, that was when they were able to put her on my chest and do skin to skin, and that was just such a relief after dealing with everything. And then that's also when the doctor kind of came over and explained everything that happened, and just said why they had to move her so quickly and everything like that. So while we were doing skin to skin, that's when I was delivering the placenta. They were dealing with my tears. I did have 3 tears. They did not have to do an episiotomy like I did with Rylan, so they had to do a few stitches there. Other than that, everything was okay. And now at this point, I was starting to feel my right leg go numb. So ridiculous, because I was feeling all the post-delivery contractions, I was feeling the placenta, I was feeling the stitches, I was feeling everything except for my right leg. So that whole epidural experience, which they do say, obviously, it's not guaranteed to work every single time. I was just a little bit more optimistic, I guess, because of my first experience with it. So whatever. I wasn't able to walk after I gave birth. I had to go in the wheelchair just because of the epidural, and it lasted for almost all night because they had cranked it up so much trying to get it to work. So that was great. So as far as like the epidural, if someone had asked me if I have another baby, would I go for the epidural again? And yes, I 100% would, just because I know that they do work, and I had such a great experience the first time with it. So, you know, having a bad experience the second time doesn't put me off from it. In hindsight, if I had known that the epidural wasn't going to work, I probably would have asked for some sort of pain management, but you get through it. My biggest fear was always having to go through the delivery without the epidural or any sort of pain management, and you know, you survive. I got through it. Yes, I felt everything, and in the moment I kept saying I can't do this, I can't do this, but you kind of have no other option at that point. Like when I was dealing with the head crowning, in my head I was like, is it too late for a C-section? That's how painful it was. But You get through it. Would I do it again? Of course. It's not the end of the world if you can't get your pain, or if it doesn't go with your birth plan. I never had a birth plan. The only thing that was really on it was the epidural, but what can you do? So I mean, comparing the two birth experience was so different. Even the labor symptoms were completely different. So even as a second-time mom, you still have no idea how everything's gonna go. You just don't know. Everything was so different with Harlow versus Rylan. So it was kind of a cool experience to be able to have both experiences, where going into labor on my own versus an induction. A lot of people say that they get super nauseous on oxytocin or the Pitocin, and I didn't. It wasn't that bad. The contractions were effective, and technically it started from 9:30, but I didn't feel anything till about 11:30. So realistically, it was only 11:30 till 2:43 of pain, and that's pretty manageable when you think about it. It is what it is, and I don't regret anything. I do have a little bit of PTSD from the whole cord knot, but again, that can be a really common thing, and you're in a hospital, you're in the best care. So yes, traumatizing, but she's okay. Everyone's okay. So that is it for my labor and delivery story. I hope some of the symptoms or the labor symptoms helped you, even though I really had no idea. And you can Google a million things you can on, forums to see oh, when am I going to go into labor? What are the odds of having going into labor early? You literally have no clue until you go through it. So you can Google all you want, but I mean, in the end, babies come out when they want to come out, and whether it's before their due date, after their due date, there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. So I am very thankful for a healthy baby, and I am thankful for the whole birthing experience, even though it did not go to, I don't want to say go to plan because I didn't have a plan, it just wasn't what I expected. So I am very thankful and fortunate that I was able to experience that. So I hope you enjoyed my labor and delivery story. She's just sleeping right now, so I won't show her again. But thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already.